Hello and welcome to the Goldenrod Podcast. I'm Ben, as always. I'm joined by fellow Pokemon enthusiast and coffee drinker, Conor, to bring you some of the latest and greatest Pokemon news and a few laughs along the way. This week, we're discussing all the cancelled Pokemon games that we know about from the last 2 decades. In our Devil's Advocate section, we'll be arguing that Game Freak should have released Pokemon Grey rather than Black 2 and White 2. As always, you can jump to a topic using the timestamps in the description below. Conor, was that coffee you were drinking?
It
tea,
was.
Or...
It's unfortunately, so it's a Costa machine coffee, which is not usually that bad. This one is awful. It's horrendous. I don't know what they've done to it, but it's not good.
Right. Okay. I'm not a coffee drinker. I wish I was a coffee drinker because there are so many different varieties and types, and rather than tea, which is literally just mainly choose a different tea bag, there's not really a lot of variety.
Well, that's just not true. The amount of tea leaves and flavors and things.
I know I'm simplifying.
You can make whatever salad water you want.
Salad water. You're not a tea drinker then?
Okay, I like English breakfast tea.
Me too. That's my favorite.
I can't do other types of tea. I've probably told this story before. When I went out to Japan, I was craving a cup of tea so much. And when you go down to the hotels, they've got tables and tables lined out with all these different tea flavors. And I'm like, which one's tea, though? They're like, no, it's all tea. I'm like, yeah, but which one's tea? No, okay. So I tried Earl Grey, I tried Golden, I tried all these different flavors of tea. And I don't know whether it was because it wasn't what I wanted or because I just genuinely didn't like the flavorings. But I've never been able to drink any type of tea that isn't English breakfast tea.
Okay. I can understand that. Like, English breakfast is my go-to, mainly because, like, a lot of the other teas sometimes can be bitter. I never get that with English breakfast. And honestly, as a drink to wake up to in the morning, there's nothing like it to start your day, in my opinion. Like, I will always go for an English breakfast, although they are dead expensive. Like, I only ever get them on offer because they're just ridiculous, ridiculously priced, especially in like and all that stuff. But people aren't here to hear about us, talking about tea, coffee,
they might be.
All that
you
kind of stuff.
That.
They might
be.
Maybe. Yeah, let us know in the comments down below or on Discord or all that usual stuff. We have had one question in, courtesy of last week, and I haven't gotten written down who submitted it, but I'm pretty sure it's Tony, regular listener Tony. So if it's you, fantastic. If not, I do apologize.
I am Solomon off the top of my head.
That's it. Yes, Tony. We're on first name. I own his book. Anyway, since Game Freak wants to give every pseudo a new form or signature move, except for Dragonite, which is Tony's favorite, which pseudo do you believe either deserves or doesn't deserve any further special? So just to recap on this, Tyranitar has a Mega Evolution. Salamence has a Mega Evolution. Metagross, Garchomp.
Salamence also has a Paradox form now.
It does, you're right. So that Metagross, Garchomp also have alternative forms. Goodra has a Hisuian version. Hydreigon has a Paradox form as well. So the Pokemon that don't have any kind of alternative version, unless I'm wrong, is Dragonite, Komono, Dragapult, and Baxcalibur.
Okay, so straight up, I think Komodo needs some love.
Yeah.
I think it is possibly the most underrated of all of those pseudo-legendaries that you just mentioned. Yeah, I think Dragapult is pretty much perfect.
Yeah, I can't see much what you would do to that, to be quite honest with you.
I absolutely love that Pokemon. I think it's nigh on perfect. I don't think it needs any change to it. Baxcalibur's too new to see anything done to it. Dragonite, the problem is, what do you do to Dragonite that doesn't ruin its big cuddly boy ability? I think if anything, it needs the Goodra treatment. It needs a Hisuian form rather than the others which have had Megas or they've had Paradox forms. I don't think that it needs those. I think it needs they keep the design fairly similar, add something very simple to it, and give it a new typing, because dragon flying's kind of garbage.
Yeah, if they were going to do anything with Dragonite where you don't butcher that initial design, I think it should have been like a custom Gigantamax form, which ties in with, one of the first appearances of Dragonite. It is absolutely huge, and I know that probably breaks the canon, because obviously, it wasn't taking place in Galar, so there's no Galar particles. I'm happy to just brush that, because one's the game, one is the anime. So I'm okay with that. So I think that's probably where they should have done something, because then it's not completely revolutionizing this Pokemon's design or typing. Because while, it's strange that Dragonite hasn't been touched for any kind of alternative form, I'm actually okay with that, because it's
such a strong design on its own.
Yeah, and it's so iconic from Gen 1, and it's such a strong design that I really don't think it needs anything else. I land on the same, the same stance as you, that Kimono. For me, that's the one that needs something, because when you look at all the rest, you go, yeah, pseudo. But that one, I don't know, maybe just because I kind of missed out on Sun and Moon, and I didn't go in as hard on that as I did the other 3DS games. Maybe that's why I've missed out on it. And I've never really used it.
If you put that up next to Haxorus and ask somebody which one of these is a pseudo legendary, I reckon the vast majority of them will get that answer wrong.
I'd agree with you there, actually. Yeah. And I think that's because Haxorus has such a design that it lends itself to the confusion of, that looks like a really strong dragon, whereas Kimono doesn't. And I think part of the issue with that Pokemon is it was introduced at the wrong time for it to shine. If it had been introduced before Generation 6, Dragon Fighting obviously doesn't have anywhere near as many weaknesses with the introduction of Fairy, and that quad Fairy weakness just means that, okay, you're expecting me to use this pseudo when Fairy's now so, like...
It's so prominent within the meta.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a real shame. And I think that is the one I would love to see some kind of alternative take on it.
Yeah, and again, I think if you're talking about meta, that's probably where Dragonite suffers the most. I think it's severely lacking in any reason to use it over other Pokemon in its weight class, shall we say. Tyranitar, phenomenal. Garchomp, phenomenal. Salamence and Metagross, they have their uses. Hydreigon has its uses. Goodra, I'm pretty sure Steel Goodra is fairly competitively good. Dragapult had its time. Baxcalibur has its moments. All of these Pokemon can easily be used. Dragonite, you don't see it really all that much.
No, Dragonite's one of them that I have used. I think it's got a lot of diversity, which lends itself to being able to slot in a team without having a specific role. It is literally just, it's got diversity. It can hit with multiple typings, but I don't see that being used much in the meta. I know it's been on winning teams before, at least teams that have gotten to the finals, because Game Freak or Pokemon Company released that video a while back. But it's just a Pokemon that I actually, you know what, I'm kind of coming around on this, that Dragonite probably does need something. It's a toss-up between those two. The difficulty is now, though, that this generation, Gen 9's gimmick doesn't really lend itself to alternative forms.
Okay.
Yet.
On that note, then, would you prefer, say we got something for the next part of the DLC, would you prefer a regional form, a paradox form, or a variant? So the Toadscrew.
Okay. I'm going to say no to variant only because I think the variant designs have been quite weak in Generation 9. So that's why I wouldn't want them to, because I think they could do that. And I just think people will go, yeah, it's just a another version of Dragonite. It's not better in any regards in terms of design. So rule that out. I actually know what I come around on this. I want to Paradox form because it would elevate the stats. I think Paradox Pokemon are stronger than Pseudo. I might be wrong. I'd have to. Connor's already furiously checking.
I'm gonna have a look for you.
Oh, because I'm curious now. But also it would give the opportunity to revolutionize its typing. That's the great thing about a lot of the Paradox Pokemon is they don't share that original typing. So I think that is what I'd personally want. The only way I'd lean away from that is if they did some kind of future or past game in Kanto, and we get to see how it's either evolved from or evolved into a different variety, such as different typing or slight variation on design, for example.
So base stat total wise, Roaring Moon, which is one of the stronger Paradox Pokemon, has 10 less points than Salamence.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's shocking.
So
because
technically weaker.
technically weaker, but it doesn't feel like it because I remember taking on that final boss fight in Violet and just thinking this team is absolutely stacked, but then you are fighting technically a team of 6 pseudos pretty much.
Yeah, and Iron Jugulus has 570.
Oh, so
and of course, all pseudo legendaries have 600 base stat total. That's what makes them pseudo.
All right, okay. What about you though, Conor? What would you like to see for the Dragonite treatment?
I could maybe get on board with a past Paradox form, but my issue with that is then how hard it is to carry that forward. I'm not sure how we get Paradox forms outside of Gen 9. They feel like a thing that's going to have to be caught in this generation and then traded up.
Agreed.
And then with the way that, you know, Dexit and all that kind of stuff has happened now, unless they decide, oh, by the way, we're allowing you to trade these Pokemons in through home, you might just never see these again. Which would be a real shame if we're going to give Dragonite a new form and then it disappears next year kind of thing. A couple of years from now. So I think for me, it has to be a regional variant. I think they are the strongest. That's the strongest way we've seen so far to give Pokemon a new lease on life. I think Megas were pretty good, but I think regional variants are so much stronger in my opinion.
Okay. If you had to choose one between Dragonite and Mono, which I've said about 5 different ways,
do you know what? Actually, here's the thing. I would give Dragonite a regional variant. I would actually see a Paradox combo. And because weirdly enough, I would see a future Paradox.
Yes, because its design feels very past orientated, and I can't explain why, because obviously it's not, but it just feels like, you know, some Pokemon just feel like they've been around a lot longer than other versions of Pokemon. That is a design that looks to me of, oh no, that's the Alpha Dragon of the Alolan region. It hasn't needed to change over time, and maybe that's how you introduce that. The change has happened because it's been the Alpha for so long, but now it has this Quad Fairy weakness. It's had to evolve in a way to minimize that. So maybe it is, I don't know, it becomes Dragon Steel, for example, because then it helps with to reduce the fairy damage.
Yeah,
that would work quite well.
And I think the scales over it lend really well to that robotic metallic look already. And you can have all this really cool lore that the plates vibrate over themselves to create this ear-splitting sound because it's got clangorous scales already as a move. So you integrate. I was putting the R in the wrong place. Integrate it into the lore of the new Pokemon.
I like that idea a lot. There we go. We've answered your questions. If you've got a question, you can comment, or I don't know why I'm rereading that. That makes no sense. If you've got a comment or question, you can reach us by leaving a comment on our podcast on YouTube, by emailing goldenrodpod@gmail.com, by leaving it on our Discord channel, or by using the hashtag goldenrodpod on Twitter. And now it's that time where we are going to be breaking down is probably the wrong word. We're going to be discussing the cancelled Pokemon games. Now, this list, we have come across it courtesy of Did You Know Gaming, who have done a load of Pokemon content in the past. So about a month ago, they published a video. Conor, you saw it a while back,
I saw it as and when it came out kind of thing.
I completely missed it somehow, which is really, really weird because it was so interesting watching them break this down. And there was a couple on there that I knew about or speculated, but then there was some that just kind of came out of nowhere. So should we run through it in almost how they do in the video, chronological order?
Yeah, have you got a list in front of you?
I've got a list in front of me. So we're starting with Pokemon Pink. Now, there's a bit of evidence surrounding this. So there's code in Pokemon Yellow that has yellow and then a number in it, and then pink with a number next to it. And in the original Red and Blue games, they had something similar, and basically it was a toggle. So in that data was they changed the 0 to a 1 to specify which of the two games you were playing. So that's the first piece of evidence. There's also evidence that Clefairy is in some of the art for the camera functionality that you could purchase, and Clefairy is sitting next to Pikachu. And while Pikachu is well known for the anime side of things because it's Ash's first Pokemon, Clefairy's the same for the manga, so Clefairy is up front. Kind of. I agree.
I'd love to talk about that in depth.
Okay. What now? Or another time?
If finish off what they say about Pokemon Pink, and then we'll discuss it. If that's okay.
Okay, absolutely fine. And then the last piece of evidence is there is one interview where, and I can't remember the name of the top honcho at Pokemon.
Ishihara.
Basically, Hishihara. I think that was him, but I haven't got it written down. Whoever it was basically said in a quote, "Oh yeah, we were thinking about pink or purple." So there's a few little pieces of evidence, and the strongest piece I think is the data. And all of that has led Did You Know Gaming to come away with the answer of, yeah, there was planned to be a Pokemon Pink game.
So now, I like the fact that they have these packages effectively within the code that say, Pokemon, are you playing Pokemon Yellow or are you playing Pokemon Pink? I think I should say that's the strongest evidence that these games were at some point planned. Again, the fact that this is the only evidence towards it suggests that these were scrapped really early on. If they were brought up. So I love the idea of Clefairy being initially Pokemon's mascot. Okay, I know this because it was the first Pokemon manga, not Pokemon Adventures, the one that a lot of people have read. It was the original Pocket Monsters manga, which have you ever looked at?
No, I thought they were one and the same.
No, they're different. They're different mangas. So Pocket Monsters is a manga that was released before the games came out. I want to say might be wrong on that one. Might be wrong on that one. It was definitely before the series came out. And it was more of a gag manga.
Oh,
and I'm fairly certain. I want to double check this before I say anything. But it was more of a gag manga, and Clefairy basically, I'm pretty sure Clefairy could talk, from what I remember.
I've heard that before.
It definitely talked when it became Mew 3. That's the most prominent chapter that I've read, because I did a whole video about many histories of Mew 2. And in that, Clefairy and its trainer go to Mewtwo's lab. You've got Mewtwo there, and it decides to put Mew's DNA in itself and becomes Mew 3.
Okay.
So it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous series, and
which the artwork lends itself to.
Yes, it does.
Like the artwork has that kind of have you ever seen the Viz? I think I want to say Viz comics, but it's a well-known satirical. I don't know. Satirical. There we go. You can tell it's been a busy day for us both.
Yes, it definitely could speak.
Yeah, right. Okay, and it feels like it isn't meant to be taken seriously just from the artwork. And I've just had a quick look. It came out just 2 months after the Japanese release of Red and Green. So they got right on this. And you know what? The fact that it's a bit of a gag comic makes me think that maybe the reason they released this as a gag series is because they didn't think Pokemon would become what it was. So they were just like, yeah, that's fine.
So I had to double check this because I didn't want to say anything. So the mangaka of that series basically got his start in hentai.
Did he? Okay,
yeah.
Right.
So there are versions of Misty and versions of the girls in there who are really drawn. How should I say? Her chest jiggled boobily.
Oh, right. Okay, that's absolutely disgusting. Where would I find that so I know to avoid it and block it on Internet
Here,
Explorer?
I'll put it in the chat for you.
Okay. Okay. For those, oh my lords, yeah, I see what you're saying. Right? Yeah. That is a perfect. It just that is what women look like.
Mm-hmm. So this,
I love how it says "pervy Pokemon" at the bottom as well.
This was only supposed to be. This was only ever released in Japan, and as I say, it was the first rendition. This version of Red still had a Pikachu. Clefairy was more the comic relief of the episode of the series. So I don't buy that they'd lend an entire game towards this manga. I don't think that Clefairy would be the star, nor do I think it would lean more heavily towards the story told in this manga, because it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
You couldn't tell the story of this manga in a game. And you wouldn't want to, for a start. And I also don't think that Pokemon or Game Freak would make the games that different. I think if they're going to make Pokemon Yellow based off the anime, whatever secondary version they were planning was also going to be based off the anime, so that they could basically palette swap it, swap out some of the Pokemon, and do what they do with Red and Blue and all the other games. So I think it is far, far more likely that it was Jigglypuff.
Okay.
Because Jigglypuff was so much more prevalent in the anime.
And that kind of lends itself to, obviously, you come across a Jigglypuff in PseudoCity's Pokemon. So it's one of those Pokemon that has an overworld sprite, because very few Pokemon have those overworld. Sorry, Pokemon do have overworld sprites in the original Gen 1 and 2 games. However, they kind of lump them all together. So, for example, there's a load of Pokemon that have the Ekans style sprite.
Or the Rhydon sprite.
Yeah, and they just kind of group them all together. Whereas I think Clefairy, at least in Yellow, had its own sprite. Or Jigglypuff had its own sprite, which lends itself to, okay, Jigglypuff you'd get as a starter, and then you'd find an overworld Pikachu somewhere else in the game. So there's like that swapping element that you spoke about. We've spoken about how we think this was scrapped quite early on. Do you think they made the right decision scrapping this game?
Yeah, I don't. So here's the thing as well. I don't know how you would have made a game with Jigglypuff as the side character or as your main partner. I just don't think it's strong enough. And I don't think it's... we had to give Pikachu the light ball to make it viable. What do you give Jigglypuff? What do you give Jigglypuff that isn't effectively Spore? And then it just becomes super broken because you just put everything to sleep immediately.
I think the problem, as someone that has had to use Wigglytuff in Nuzlocke before, it is absolutely a shocking moveset. It's just not a powerhouse. It's got a load of moves early on that are very much RNG based. Double slap can miss, sing can miss. It's got a load of those type of moves, and it doesn't lend itself. Pikachu's very offensive. Jigglypuff with like minimizing stuff is very defensive. I personally, just as I would have loved to have seen this. I'm curious about it, but I actually think it would have been to the detriment of the company to actually do another 2 versions, because then at that point they've got 5 versions for the first generation, which seems a bit...
Well, yeah, because they had red, green, and then in Japan they had blue, and then yellow.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, over here we only got red and blue, but you got to realize that those are... They've taken their Pokemon Blue and split it into 2 games. We never saw red and green over here, so... Yeah, it's a lot of games.
Yeah, I think it would have actually hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think yellow as a standalone version works, because it's like, oh, we've taken a little bit longer. We've updated and tweaked some of the stuff from the first couple of games, so this is the definitive way to play the first game. Because for me, if I was a kid thinking, okay, and I made this decision, I could have had red on my birthday, but I chose to wait a couple of days to get yellow because I wanted, okay, that's the newer version. It's closer to the anime, which I enjoy, so I wanted that. Me as a kid, though, if I'd have come across, oh, there's also a pink edition, I think it makes yellow weaker, because now it's not the definitive way, because now there's technically two definitive ways to play this. It just confuses it. And I think it would then lower yellow standard.
I think one of the other problems you got as well is, they even said this in the video, that Pokemon Pink was designed to target towards the female demographic. And I think that would have actually hurt Pokemon in the long run. Not because having females within the Pokemon community is a bad thing. Quite the opposite. I think it would have pigeonholed them. It would have been like, no, you play that one. You're a girl. You play the pink version. You get Jigglypuff. You don't get Pikachu. You don't get Charmander. You don't get Bulbasaur. You don't get Squirtle. You play pink. You get Jigglypuff or Clefairy. Because you're a girl.
And just to add on to that, I think that might have hurt them as well, because you know what children are like at primary school and high school. Oh, you're playing that girls' game because it's pink. Because there's a pink box art with Clefairy on it. And of course, people then, oh, I don't want to play this. Even though it's not a girls' game at all.
No, it's the same game.
And the main character in Gen 1, it can only be male. But I think it actually would have hurt them to release this. So maybe that's why they thought, well, let's shelve this. And I am glad they did. I would have loved to have seen that, because I love the color pink. But I think this is one of those that, unlike some of these later on in the list, it will never see the light of day, because it never got far enough into development. And other than maybe a fan-made game somewhere, this one's lost to time.
I mean, it's interesting as well, because we wouldn't see for a long time this idea of the masterful version of the game, the definitive version, the third version, be split into 2. And we didn't see it until Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which I think are some of the weakest titles. Like, sorry, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are great games. They added enough to the base game, as far as I'm concerned. But I don't think there's enough variance in them to justify it not being Pokemon Stars or Pokemon Prism. You could quite easily have just gone, no, in this you catch Necrozma, and then you have to trade over Solgaleo or Lunala to get the final version of it. I think that would have gone down just as well.
Yeah, I can understand that. Should we move on to the next game?
Mm-hmm.
So Pokemon Picross. Picross. I don't know why I'm overcomplicating that. So this was a game that was actually complete. The video actually specifies, like, this game was finished. It was ready to go. So if you don't know what this game is, I didn't until watching the video, but it's somewhere between. They describe it as a cross between somewhere between Minesweeper and Sudoku, which kind of makes sense. Like you press A and you move some of the numbers around to make sure it's safe to click on and all that kind of stuff. It's made by the same people that made the Pokemon Pinball spin-offs as well, which again, news to me. So they were quite tight with Game Freak, it seems, in terms of developments and stuff like this. You can choose from a number of different starters which reflect on the screen. You see that Pokemon and the colors change. So you got Pikachu, Bulbasaur, and this is one of those other like links that they give it, is that you could also have pink and purple, so Clefairy or Jigglypuff. So there's a link there as well. And this game was scrapped, and we didn't see an alternative version until 2015 when a 3DS version was released, but only on digital, which means that 3DS servers are down now. The store's gone. You're not getting this game legitimately. Gonna add that in there.
Just leave that there for you. Interpret it as you wish.
As you wish. This game is why. So, I think I've got an idea as to why this wasn't released. Have you got any thoughts?
Nothing off the top of my head. I mean, they still kept the license. The company who made the game still kept the license up until the DS. Where did they release? No, they never released the pinball on the DS, did they? We come to that later.
No, they didn't.
But I think this Picross game came out, or was supposed to come out between the two pinball games.
Okay.
He wants to say.
So while you're just looking up, I'm going to give my thoughts as to why they didn't release it. And I think the video mentions later on that the spin-off games don't sell as well as the mainline games. Like that shouldn't be news to anybody. So did they think this early on, oh, we could potentially release it, we're not going to make much money, and it potentially dilutes the brand too early on in this in Pokemon's journey of, oh, Pokemon's releasing games left, right, center. It splits the fan base in terms of what games they can afford to buy. So therefore, let's hold off on that. Let's just release the ones that we think are going to do really well, such as like the trading card game, for example, because the trading cards were a big thing back then. Have you found the answer, Conor?
It was announced in 1999, it was announced in spring. So even we say they're looking for that kind of autumn release. Let's have a look when the Pokemon pinball games came out.
Should know that. We've got a video on that.
The first one came out in 1999, and the second one, Ruby and Sapphire. Oh, of course, Ruby and Sapphire came out far later. It came out in 2003. Yeah, so my question was basically, did they lose the license? No, the answer is no. They held on to the license. So they still had the license, and they were still making games for Game Freak, and they just decided, nah, we're not going to release this.
It's just bizarre, that is.
For like, what? And again, considering that you can get hold of the demo of this game, which plays from start to finish, there was a prototype released in 2020. The game's finished. So the game got made, the license was retained, everything was good to go, and they just went, you know what, don't even worry about it.
The only additional cost that obviously wouldn't be factored in, we say it's complete, but back then they still have to handle distribution. There's a cost to distribution because it was all physical back then. That's the only sticking point I can think was the reason it didn't come out is, okay, actually, we've paid up front for this game, but when we take into distribution costs, we just don't think it's going to make the money back. Therefore, it's better to just cut our losses at this stage rather than distribute it. But if this, which, okay, I can get behind that. But if this game's fully done, made, it blows my mind that this wasn't released on the 3DS console as a, nod back to what could have been. It's now available. But again, the only thing I can think of is there a license issue there where, you can put, Nintendo can publish it on the 3DS, but it's that sticky ground of, well, it's not a Game Freak game. It's owned by, I can't remember the name of the company, Jupiter something, isn't it? So is that potentially why we didn't get it? There's just a lot of like corporate, what's the word I'm looking for? Like corporate crossed wires that just complicates this.
Not sure. Apparently, the Gold & Silver demo, the Space World demo.
Yeah.
Had a Picross minigame in it.
Oh.
So I don't know how useful that information is to you, but I just found it very interesting that Picross was clearly something Game Freak were interested in. the Pokemon Company were interested in. There clearly seemed to be a want to have a Picross game.
Yeah, the thing that's stumbling me up is the fact that we saw a 3DS version come eventually. So I'm just really like, why not then? But then, what, 16 years later? 15, 16 years later, they then do a 3DS version?
The thing is, I think it makes a lot more sense on the 3DS because it's with a
Agreed.
stylus.
Yeah.
I think it's a game that lends itself to having a stylus. I don't think it would have been unplayable, though, with just, like, shifting around with the analog.
Yeah, agreed. Because it's quite simple. It lends itself to
it's
the
grid-based.
limited... Yeah. And it lends itself to, obviously, the original Game Boy and the Game Boy Color have very little inputs. They've literally got A, B, directional pad, and then start and select. That's all it's got. So it lends itself to that very easy to control design. I personally have never played the Pokemon Picross game. However, and I'm not that interested in playing the 3DS version. However, this is something just because of it's part of history that never happened. I would be interested in playing.
Yeah, I've got no answers for this one. I haven't even got the foggiest idea as to why they would just cancel this last moment.
It's bizarre, absolutely bizarre. Let's move on to the next one, which this was completely news to me. The upgraded Chinese editions of FireRed and LeafGreen, which at first, like when they announced it in the video, I thought, oh, it's FireRed and LeafGreen with some quality of life improvements.
No, they added internet functionality.
It blows my mind. So let's just like recap on everything, so everyone's on the same wavelength here. So it was presented in a pitch in 2004, and it follows basically a ban in China on consoles entering the Chinese market. So Nintendo worked around this by working with a company called iQue to get around it, and they produced a number of consoles or variants of Nintendo consoles. So the experience of this upgraded version was it was the basic FireRed and LeafGreen service. However, like Conor said, it had internet functionality. So every time the player linked the game to the internet, the server would update the Pokemon available on the map according to the IP address. There was a weather concept in the game, which again was based on where you're playing. This is the IP address. It's raining in that region, therefore you get rain in the game. What else was in there? So there was an enhanced Pokemon Center, so that in offline mode, so when you're not connected, you only have access to 30 Pokemon. But when online, one of the menus accesses a server database where you can put Pokemon in and out. Basically, Pokemon Bank or Pokemon Home. And then if you wanted to play with other people, you would enter an online tournament mode. However, you wouldn't play it in the game. You would play a 3D version of it similar to Pokemon Stadium or Coliseum, and you would use your controller as the game set as the controller. And there was online distribution in this, and it was going to be more of a so we wouldn't get what we've complained about in previous games of, oh, your mythical or legendary is just like you type in a code. They would, over time, add new areas to facilitate the distribution of those Pokemon. And the example they give is Deoxys in the Sevi Islands, so there'll be more of that. Like, this game is it's bizarre. And the reason it's bizarre is because all this now, at this stage, feels very much oh, okay, fine, whatever. But back then, this was like revolutionary.
This is stuff that was taken and implemented over the next couple of generations.
It is, yeah. I was going to mention that, funnily enough, like the weather mechanics. Pokemon Go feels like a nod to this in some ways, in terms of those Pokemon where you can find them, those spawns change over time. There's the weather effect as well. Being able to put your Pokemon into a 3D game. Came before this with obviously Generation 1, but it hasn't been done again since Pokemon Battle Revolution. You could trade Pokemon over, I think, for that.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. What else? Pokemon Bank or Pokemon Home?
That
kind
idea
of
is
functionality.
Because you had Box in Generation 3.
Yes.
Which was a
did.
completely separate game that you had to buy. And it was on the GameCube, if I remember correctly.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So the idea of this all being available on the Game Boy Advance, not the 3DS, not the DS, not even the DS, not with the Wi-Fi capabilities that the DS had, on the Game Boy Advanced, which didn't even have its own internet capabilities.
It's crazy, which makes me think, like, how would that internet connection work? Is it you plug it in? Because what we don't know is obviously, from what they were saying in the video, it seems like the way that it was an alternative of the SP, which is the one. It was still the Game Boy Advance, except for it was a flip screen and it had a backlight. So they were the main and a rechargeable battery. So they were the three key functions of this new game. Obviously, working with IQ, did they update this and add some kind of Wi-Fi functionality?
So less like it's I don't know the answer to this. I'm going to preface this first and foremost. I think if it's anything like we saw out of technology from Japan at the time, it would have been a cellular connection. So you would have had, because you had this back on even I think the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance had this where you could have a cable that connected between your cellular phone and your Game Boy, so that you could get
cable,
quote unquote, internet connection. So I think it would have probably been something like that rather than Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Like this game, for the most part, is literally the FireRed and LeafGreen experience that we've likely all played at this point. But these additional functions, like none of it is that completely revolutionary now thinking about it. But back then, could you imagine that? The spawns will change based on the weather, and suddenly, like, if you think completing the Pokedex now is difficult, could you imagine if this game had come out and it's like, oh, I can't complete the Pokedex because it's not raining, and therefore I can't.
It's not raining outside now.
Yeah, I can't.
We're
get
in a drought, so I can't catch my water Pokemon.
Like, this is absolutely fascinating. But the access to a box functionality, because the video doesn't make any reference whatsoever to if there's an additional cost to this, because we know Pokemon Bank, Pokemon Home, they have additional costs. So that's another element of this that I find fascinating. Of would this have been a free service, or would it have been an ongoing payment to get those Pokemon? But then, like, could you imagine if this game had come out and the having to transfer those Pokemon? Like, we think it's confusing now transferring Pokemon from Generation 3 upwards, but this would have added one of those additional layers. Like, we've all seen that picture of, okay, this is how you get Pokemon into Pokemon Home, and it's like connected to Pokemon Bank that's connected to all the different like Poke transporters and stuff like that. It's complicated as anything. An extra layer for this game would have been absolutely insane. So in terms of why this then didn't come out, it's only speculated in the video, but Did You Know Gaming arrive at the conclusion based on conversations with the developers who don't want to be named, is that too many people in China were pirating games. So they thought, well, people are pirating games, we're not going to be able to sell this as well as we want, which I could get if this was just FireRed and LeafGreen, but I'd like to think those additional connectivity elements that connect to the internet might have helped to mitigate that. But then I'd imagine, because like now, for example, like the Nintendo servers can pick up on, oh yeah, that's a hack mon, something dodgy about that mon based on different flags. But was the system sophisticated enough back then to be able to do anything about that? So could you have pirated the game and still played it?
See, I don't even like that argument because why release any games consoles over there then? Why agree to the whole IQ partnership? Why release any games in China? If, they're just all going to get pirated, so why bother? I'm not a big fan of that argument. I think realistically, and this is again purely speculative, Nintendo went, you want to do what with our game? Yeah, no, that's a really great idea. You're not doing it first.
Yes.
And again, we've seen similar things. I've made this argument over and over again. I think that BDSP was supposed to be a very different game until Game Freak went, sorry, you want to do what with our franchise? No. You don't get to show us up. You don't get to do Pokemon better than we do.
Yeah. I think that's a valid argument, to be quite honest with you. It's almost like, oh, you're going to release FireRed and LeafGreen? Fantastic. Oh, you want to change and adapt what we think works already? No. But thanks for the ideas. We'll implement them.
Yeah, we'll do them ourselves later.
Yeah. It's absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. It's a game that I'm not that fussed about it dying a death, but the details surrounding it are absolutely
we'd have never seen
fascinating. No, we wouldn't. No.
It's fascinating. It's a fascinating pitch. The fact that it was theoretically possible at the time is amazing. And as we say, it probably led to the development in the future games. But yeah, I'm okay with it not existing.
One that I think I would like to see exist is the Pokemon Pinball for the DS. So this follows previous two versions that we've had on the Game Boy Color Advance. One
of which we have covered in XP Share. Go check it out.
You should. This comes courtesy of a 2021 leak, and it was scheduled to come out around the time of Diamond and Pearl. And it was going to be made by Fused Games, who have done other pinball games, including Metroid and Mario, a couple of others. And the dev said that it'd be more adventure-like. You would progress through the routes and find Pokemon on those routes. You'd hit them with the Pokeball to stun them, and then you click on the screen, because it's a DS, to catch it. You would, over time, build up a team, progress through the different tables, and then take on a gym leader in the gym. And this is the part that fascinates me about this game, is the fact that when you get to the gym leader, the flippers are on both ends. If you lose your ball, your opponent gets to attack back, and it's basically a Pokemon pinball version of
air hockey.
Yeah. But it's like this is, how do you take the Pokemon battle mechanics and apply it to a pinball game? And this is how you do it. And you could also they were planning that you could do Wi-Fi battles using this as well. So you'd be able to play pinball with other players and have that kind of battle mechanic. Unfortunately, though, the demo, for whatever reason, wasn't greenlit. And the company went bankrupt in 2009, so they're not coming back to publish or make this. However, the video is very clear that Nintendo still has the prototype. They've still got that initial build. So, are we going to... So, I guess the question for you, do you think at some point this is getting leaked or released onto the internet?
Yes. I think, given what we've seen over the last couple of years with the Space World demo, with this Picross game coming out, yeah. If this exists somewhere in a vault, somebody's releasing it.
Yeah. Would you play it?
Oh, absolutely. I think when we spoke about the original pinball game, I said that it would lend itself really well to the DS because you have the two screens, as opposed to having to scroll up and down the pinball table. It lends itself really well to it. Yeah, I'd have loved to see this.
Yeah, me too. It's a real shame, actually, because Pokemon Pinball, like I said in that XP Share episode, that I played that game at the wrong time of my life. If I'd have played it as a kid, I would have completed that Pokedex.
I would have invested hours into it.
I would have done it, and it's such a shame because now I wish I'd have played that as a kid, and I wish I played the Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire version, and then, of course, this one. But in terms of why it wasn't likely greenlit. So I've got a little chart here that shows how many units were sold. The original Pokemon Pinball sold 5.3 million, so below red, green, and blue and yellow. And then Pokemon Ruby Pinball Ruby and Sapphire sold 1.4 million. Again, way less than Ruby and Sapphire. FireRed and LeafGreen kind of shows a downward trajectory of Pokemon pinball games. So maybe they're looking at this going, you've sold nearly 4 million less pinball games than the previous version. Are we likely to see a drop for the next game, and therefore it's not going to make the money? It's just such a shame.
I'm going to try and find sales figures real quick for Metroid Pinball.
Oh, yes.
Because that's the nearest comparison, really, isn't it?
Well, it's made by the same company, and that is an adventure-style pinball game.
Yeah, it's basically it's the engine that you used.
Yeah, and that's what the video states that's what attracted the Pokemon Company to Fused Games, because they saw this, what they'd done with Metroid, and were like, oh yeah, we want a piece of that. Rather than going with the previous developers who did the last two.
2.8. Oh no, that's Metroid. Is that Prime? That's Metroid Prime. That's not what I'm after. Even Prime sold 2.8 million? That seems very low for Metroid Prime, but okay.
It does, doesn't it? That's what I was thinking, actually. I thought Metroid was one of the big Nintendo franchises that sold millions.
Hilariously, this is a massive tangent, but there's a theory that Metroid Prime got made because sort of the head of Nintendo didn't know what to do with Metroid because he doesn't like the series.
Really?
That's why he just handed it off and went, oh, do whatever you want. Just put a game out. See if I care. And
that's fantastic.
And now it's a classic.
Right. That's interesting. Metroid is it's one of those series that I know a lot about, and yet I've never played a single game in the franchise. Got to feel like that I just collectively know knowledge about them for whatever reason, and they live rent-free in my head, but I don't know why I know it.
Okay. Metroid Prime Pinball. I have a figure.
Okay.
Do you want to guess? It's in millions.
It's in the millions. Okay.
Well, no.
Sorry.
The sales figures are in millions.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Then it's not even a tick on the chart. It's not even hit a million. It's like 400,000.
0.255 million, which is what, 250,000 copies?
Yeah, about 250,000 copies. Okay.
Yeah, I can see why they didn't greenlight this game.
Yeah. It's great. It functions well. It's fantastic. You're not going to sell. So, sorry. I get it. I think it would have sold more than that.
It would have sold more than that because it's Pokemon.
Yeah.
But I don't think 500,000 is enough or even 1 million is enough to greenlight a Pokemon game.
Yeah. I agree with that, because Ruby and Sapphire Pinball sold 1.4 million. I think that's a low number for a Pokemon spin-off game, especially when the first Pinball did 5.3. So this is a real shame that we didn't get this, but I can understand why. Should we move on to the next game?
Yes.
Okay, Pokemon Gray. So apparently, initially, Pokemon Gray was rumored to be the game instead of Black and White 2. Black and White 2 wasn't the game that they were thinking of from the outset. All they knew is they wanted to do something after Black and White, which tied in with Black and White, as they had done for the previous 4 generations. There's a couple of pieces of evidence that lend itself to this. There were URLs purchased by Nintendo for Pokemon White, Black, and Gray. Purchasing URLs is just standard company procedure of, we might use this in the future, let's buy it now. Otherwise, we run the risk of, we're doing Pokemon Gray, they go and buy the URL. Oh, okay, right, they suddenly want a load of money for whoever owns that domain. There's traces of Gray in the Black and White data, so the name Gray in the Black and White data. There's also, in that game, Blackstone, Whitestone, and Godstone. The Godstone was used. And I've got a quote here from a Famitsu DS Wii article from June 2012. When we talked to Ishihara, he said, if it's going to be on DS instead of 3DS, I want some kind of new innovation added to it. It was then we came up with the idea of numbering for the first time in this series. So the plot set 2 years after, and that's where we get Black and White 2. And what we have to remember is this was released after the 3DS was already out. But the reason why they decided to go with the DS is the DS had 152 million units, whereas the 3DS at this point only had 19 million units. So from a player base, and there's more players with a DS, therefore we're able to sell to more people. We're therefore able to get money.
Also, our engine already works, and we're scared of new technology. I mean, they never said that, but let's face facts.
Because, like, I looking back, I would be okay with them releasing a sprite-based game on the 3DS. But at the time, like, that would have been, I think, a major red flag.
It would have been a kick in the teeth. It's like, why am I going out to buy a brand new console for...
Which is 3DS.
A third version of a game, not being funny, a lot of people skipped, at least to my memory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I couldn't see. Black and White 2 were obviously the right answers. They are some of the best games in the franchise. I don't want to say too much about this one because I've got to argue against its existence later.
Yeah, I agree though. Pokemon Gray just seems they made the right decision overall. But like we said before we started recording, like Gray just sounds dull and boring, especially when you consider so many of the Pokemon games are named after colors that are bright, they're fanciful, they are, Ruby, Sapphire, Diamond, Pearl, like they just those words speak to there's quality in this, there's wealth in this, and then gold, silver, and then Gray, it just doesn't work. There's a couple of other bits and pieces in that apparently N wasn't set to feature originally, which is an interesting choice because, like, when people talk about Black and White and Black and White gets held up, I think now is one of the gold standards of Pokemon. It was at their highest, and coupled with that, N just fits nicely into that conversation. So I find it bizarre that they were thinking at one point they weren't going to bring N back.
Yeah,
but we don't know.
That's a weird shout. I can see why, because N's story is so intrinsically linked with the first telling of Black and White, and it comes to an end.
Yeah.
Like, his story arc is complete. You save him from becoming the king of a new world under the thumb of Getsis, and we get to learn how he was groomed and how freaking horrible that story actually is. It's so gross. I hate it. Anyway, and he doesn't really come back a lot in Black and White 2. He shows up on his dragon. It's like, stop it, Getsis. Stop it. Stop it.
Behave.
Okay, bye. And that's kind of it. So, if he wasn't really part of Black and White 2, I don't think I'd have minded. I think he could quite easily have been post-game. I think he could have easily been, like, Red in Gold and Silver.
Ooh,
you go off and you fight another dragon owner.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been it. Yeah.
I like that idea a lot.
But as you say, N is so synonymous with Black and White that people would have kicked off if he wasn't at some point part of the story.
Agreed. Let's, because we don't want to discuss too much about this because, as you said, we got it for the Devil's Advocate section. Let's move on to Pokemon Z, which, out of all this entire list, this is the one that I know I have the most knowledge about in terms of, this is like that urban legend, like Mew in the original games. Do you think that's fair to say?
As in, like, it's an urban legend that everybody kind of knows to be fact.
Yeah. It's a bizarre game, and what they've got for their evidence is that there is a slot in 2015 where Game Freak didn't release a Pokemon game, and it's the only year in just over a decade that didn't get an additional Pokemon game. That 2015 lines up quite nicely with most of the Pokemon games getting a sequel or a third entry roughly 2 years later. So that's where that slot comes in of, there should have been a Pokemon Z there. There's in games released around that time, they have a data list, and the data list is to support them when later games come back or past games that they can connect, because they know the names of these games that they need to connect with. And included in that list are a few other games, including Alola Reserve, which I think eventually becomes Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. There's also in that list Generation 1 and 2 games that were released for the 3DS Virtual Console. And then there's also 2 additional Kalos games in there. Now, one Kalos game kind of lends itself to its Pokemon Z. But because there's 2, their reasoning in the video is that we were going to get a X2 and a Y2, but the 2s were going to kind of look like Zs. And it would follow, obviously, Zygarde would be one of the main characters, who is criminally underused in that game. Like, underused is an overstatement. It literally lives in a cave, and you get it post-game. Like, that is it.
Well, and the fleshing out of Zygarde's character that they clearly created for Pokemon Z got shoehorned into Sun and Moon.
Yeah.
Where suddenly, oh yeah, no, we're the guys from X and Y. Remember us? Here, have this thing that collects Zygarde cells, because Zygarde's here for some reason. Go collect its ultimate form. Why is it here? Why is it in Alola? It makes no sense. This was clearly... And what I wonder, and this really is one of those things where I get annoyed at game companies, did they have this planned for Z when they were coming up with X and Y? Is this something they could have implemented into X and Y and left it out because it was, well, no, it's content for the next game? Or did they come up with it after X and Y came out to go, okay, let's flesh out Zygarde. What can we come up with? We're going to implement it in Z. Oh, no, wait, Z's not coming out. Okay, we'll put it in Sun and Moon instead. Because it feels too much to me like they had this for X and Y and went, nah, we'll hold off the content.
I agree with that.
We'll hold it off for the effective DLC.
Yeah, which you would want to do, like as a company, you would want to do that. Of this is the base game. There's enough content in that to satisfy people.
X and Y, is there? X and Y is the game that clamors for a sequel game the most.
Well, I think that's my point. There is there's enough here for a base game that people can go, oh yeah, I played it, I had an experience, I caught loads of new Pokemon, and I really wish there was an edition of this that kind of had all those additional features that would make me go, oh, that's the definitive version, I want to buy that. I want more of that because I enjoyed it, but I can acknowledge that there wasn't enough in there. So I think you are right. It was a case of, okay, there's enough in X and Y, let's save the rest for Pokemon Z, X2, Y2, whatever it was. And the fact that there are apparently 2 versions of those Kalos games lends itself to, okay, Black and White 2, even though I don't think it sold as well as they wanted, it was a direction that they thought, okay, there's something here about sequels, let's replicate that on the current generation of consoles and see how that goes. And then that also lends itself quite nicely to why we didn't get a version of Generation 7 in Sun and Moon that's one game. We got the same again. We got 2 games, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. So it lends itself quite nicely to there being sequels to this, or potentially an XZ and a YZ, however you want to look at it.
Because you did have the anime went on to become XYZ.
Yeah.
And like, was very focused on Zygarde.
There's a lot of individual pieces of evidence that on their own feels like, oh, okay, I can see the point, but when you kind of bring them all together, it does feel like, oh, there was a plan here, and for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And whether or not that's time constraints, whether or not it's... Because my thought on this, and this is just me guessing, is they they either overestimated their staff and the skills that they have, or they underestimated how much time and commitment would be required from the jump from DS to 3DS. And suddenly they thought, oh, okay, we've got this. We're also doing ORAS. We've got Sun and Moon down the line. Okay, let's part that. And I think that's why. And another reason I think that is because Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, there isn't a great deal difference outside of they move some of the story mechanics and locations around in terms of the progression, and then they tack on a few extra bits, which again makes me think, okay, what's the bare minimum we can get away with introducing in Sun and Moon to justify packaging this as an extra game?
Well,
I
Ultra
think
Space
that
is pretty good.
Pardon?
Ultra Space is pretty good.
Oh, no, I completely agree. I love that feature. But I think my point is that they struggled with the 3DS era, and something had to give, and a sequel was what they could drop to free up development time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think what essentially happened was they were so used to these sequel games being a case of like, we've got the engine, we're just making some minor differences. We'll put a team of 10 to 20 people on it, and they'll be able to do it, and it'll be fine. And they just weren't, and it wasn't enough. And somebody had to go, hey, 20th anniversary is coming out. We're releasing the new game for the 20th anniversary. It was the 20th anniversary, wasn't it? Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Sounds about right. All hands on deck. If you can't get that up to snuff because we're not capable because of new technology and stuff like that, just don't bother. We're not gonna do it. Just get over here. We're also struggling on this game.
Yeah. I honestly think I don't know if this will, what we're speculating on will ever be confirmed, but it feels like it feels like that is the conclusion that most people would reach, I think, after watching this as well. Because it also mentions in the video that at that time, Game Freak was split into two teams. So you got two production teams. The first production team was working on what's called, I think, Gears.
The Gear project.
Which we've spoken about previously, which is, okay, developers,
make us a game
Pokemon.
Better than Pokemon. We're bored of Pokemon. Go make us a game that's just as profitable, but better. Yeah,
good luck with that. Honestly,
sure.
Easy. Yeah. Let me just think of that. You know what? I've got it day one. I know what we're doing.
I know. Should we try and make a better Pokemon game? No. Keep making the same Pokemon game. Go make us a different game that's better than Pokemon. Sure. All right.
And the few clips they have of these Gear projects, I just don't see where they thought it would be better than Pokemon. Because I'm looking at them thinking these are just boring, uninspired, I guess. Which is such a shame. Anyway, so they had these two production teams working on Gears and then another one on Pokemon. So again, lends itself to they were understaffed for the Pokemon side of things. Therefore, Pokemon Z got scrapped. Let's jump into the second to last game that was apparently cancelled. Now, this is, I think, the weakest one out of all of them.
Stars.
Except for maybe Pokemon Pink, is Pokemon Stars, which was reported to be, from Eurogamer, a version of Sun and Moon that was coming to the Nintendo Switch. And the evidence they list here is the fact that around the same time, there was a Pokemon campaign around Look Upon the Stars, and there was a load of merchandise released. There was an Amazon pre-order that was available, but there's no box art, that became ranked 87th on video game bestsellers. On the actual Pokemon website, it said coming to Switch as well. And there was a Alola Reserve in the game code. Now, I think all those are interesting points, but I don't think any of them prove that Pokemon Stars was ever a thing outside of maybe initial conversations.
Yeah, and the idea was that it was going to be Pokemon Sun and Moon, but on the Switch.
Yeah. And
yeah, I hate this game. I hate this rumor. For my own personal reasons, it was included in that one video, the one that helped me blow up that I despise to this date. Scarlet and Violet.
Pokemon, they've had enough time, haven't they?
They've had loads of times. They've been working on it for 8 years, don't you know? Since Pokemon Stars, like that was Scarlet and Violet, guys. That's the game they were really trying to make all along. So yeah, I know quite a bit about Pokemon Stars. I know the guy who reported on it still swears to this day that, like, no, I saw what I saw. I didn't go off like one account. I didn't have one reference for this. Lots and lots of people told me this was a thing. It just never emerged. Now I think the best explanation for this is that somebody was running a version of Sun and Moon on the Switch to see how feasible it was, how the engines could be transferred over.
So the other thing that I think lends itself quite nicely to that is the fact that I've heard rumors that Sword and Shield was meant to originally be on the 3DS and then kind of got ported over because we can't have it on the 3DS anymore. It needs to be on. So that lends itself to that of, okay, can this work? Yes. Okay, we can do Pokemon on the Switch. Okay, Sword and Shield development moves to Nintendo Switch, and Sun and Moon Stars was just, like you say, the testing of that.
Because remember the controversy around Dexit, where they said, "Oh, it's the high quality models that we just can't do," and then we found out it was the same 3DS models that they were using.
Yes,
so Sword and Shield was effectively a 3DS game port to the Switch. So as I say, I could quite easily see them testing that with what they already had available, which was Sun and Moon, and somebody going, "Oh, we're doing a Sun and Moon game, but on the Switch," and it's like, not really what's happening. But I can see why some people inside the company would say that, especially considering that the one person who excuse me, Mr. Marley, move.
So sorry for those that are listening on podcast. Connor's talking to his dog, not me.
No. I'm just getting barked at for no reason. I think given that the only person to ever report on this is an American reporter, I'm not saying that there was miscommunication through mistranslation, but I'm certainly saying it's possible. And it would lend credence to the fact that, no, I didn't misreport what I was told from numerous sources, but it might be a case of wasn't actually quite what you were told.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that a lot of these pieces of evidence that line up, I think, are just misconstrued. Like, so for example, Alolan Reserve in the game code, that could have literally been Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. That we like, I'm saying Alola Reserve was in the game code, but at that point it was, we know we're doing a sequel or a third version of this game, as we've always done. That's just what we've got in the game code at the moment. Coming to Switch on the Pokemon website, again, could have just been a communication error within the company. And really annoyingly, it says that the team was fired, but it isn't clear whether or not that was a result of this, whether or not it's a coincidence or not. But if that was why they were fired, that's a shame. In terms of the Amazon pre-order stuff, like, my understanding of Amazon is anyone can list pretty much anything. So you just list it and then people see it, and like, that is just a nothing sandwich for me. Look Upon the Stars, that campaign, that merchandise campaign that went on at the same time. It could be a coincidence. You could argue, well, the Pokemon are the stars of the Pokemon franchise. That's why we're giving them time to shine. And to be fair, even the stars ties in with Moon anyway. It just ties in anyway. I really, I really just don't see this being. I think out of all of them, this is the weakest one. I think it's the one that out of all of them as well, probably the least excited for. We've seen what Pokemon games run like on the Switch, and Oh boy, they're not great. So I'm actually glad that Sun and Moon didn't come to the Nintendo Switch, because I think that it would have really, I think it would have landed really badly in terms of, like, we've moved to the Switch. This is supposed to be a step up, and yet
it's the same game.
Yeah, I think it would have caused a load of it. I think there's an argument to be made that the sequels could have, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon could have been on the Switch, but again, I still think that would have created, I think it just would have disappointed a section of the fans, because they would have gone, okay, this is the first Pokemon game on the Switch, and it's literally 89% of the previous game on the 3DS, like, and you haven't changed much. I would have preferred to have waited for something else to come out.
But if you want to play Pokemon Stars, get yourself a legal copy of Sun and Moon, make a ROM of it, and then play it on an emulator and do it in 4K. It's effectively what Stars was going to be. So there you go.
There you go. Just do that. Yeah, when they were showing on the video, like, this is it on the 3DS on 240p, and then here it is on the Switch at 1080p. I'm just like, yeah, I've got an emulator that can do that. That's not that impressive. Like, yep. I don't know how it works. I know there's some upscaling that goes on, but it's really not that impressive. I think what is impressive, though, is the next game, if you're ready to move on.
Yeah.
So the final game, this is the one that out of all of them I would love to play, and it is available to play. But all the rest of them, I had some kind of knowledge that there was either that version was in development, it got scrapped, or there was a sequel to it or a prequel to it. This is one that I completely went over me. So Pokemon 2000 Adventure Game, which was a game that was developed, I don't know the company name, but they were commissioned by Warner Brothers as part of the promotion for the Pokemon 2000 movie that was coming out at the time. And they published this game, which is basically you pick one of 3 star teams, you pick a difficulty, you go around I want to say 3D area, but it's not 3D, it's like 2D sprites, but it's on a 3D playing field. It's Doom
is the best way to explain it, I think.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's exactly how I'd explain it. If I didn't muck it up. But you basically go around, you then find the 3 legendary birds, you have to do some kind of puzzle, you get a token, and then Professor Oak basically goes, oh, congratulations, saved the world. So it's a very, very simplistic web-based game. And I say simplistic, like, at the time, like, I've seen web-based games around that time, and they were never great. So this...
What are you talking about? Adventure Quest was amazing.
Which one was Adventure Quest?
Adventure Quest was like the Flash MMORPG. Anyway, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
I don't think I remember that. Is that the time when they had, like, not MSN? What was the other well-known internet browser back then?
AOL.
Oh, AOL. The AOL Flash games. I don't know if you remember them.
No, not
they
off
had
the
like
top of my
loads
head.
they had loads of. I remember playing them at high school, like RPG, like games that were like Final Fantasy but AOL. It was really, really interesting times. Anyway, so this game that was developed within a short amount of time hit 1 million downloads, which, again, now if a game sold 1 million, be like, oh, okay. But as a internet-based game back in 2000, based on Pokemon, these figures are absolutely crazy. So at which point, the Pokemon company stepped in and said, oh, we know we paid you as part of this, and we said that you could do promotional materials, but this is going too far. You've created a Pokemon game. We're going to issue a cease and desist order. You need to take that game down.
Yeah, we said you could make merchandise, not you could make a game.
Yes. And I can understand why they stepped in to protect their IP. I understand why. But, like, this blow... like,
what's that? Game Freak stepped in because somebody made a game better than they could, and they said, not on my watch, sir! How dare you over-promise? How dare you over-deliver and make us have to make a better game? Not today!
It is very much... I think this is very much a culture difference between, the East and the West in terms of when they've set up that contract of, no, we don't need to be any clearer than this. It's pretty obvious what you can and can't do. And then obviously over in, I think it was America, they've looked at it and gone, doesn't say anything about not being able to make a game. And let's be honest with you.
The thing is, I think that initial contract allowed them to make a game. But if you consider the other kind of games that were coming out of that were promotional material, you're talking about like going through mazes. Nothing more interactive than a friggin' XP screensaver, really.
Mm.
So I think that's the level they thought they were getting. And these guys went and produced a game.
Yeah, which by modern day our standards at this time isn't a great game. It looks very basic. But at the time, I would have loved to have spent, a couple of minutes. And it rewarded replayability because you could choose one of three teams and you could then choose the difficulty. So it rewarded you to play again and again and again. And like, this is really bizarre because like, no, I don't think anyone expected it to do as well as it did. And if it didn't do as well as it did, I don't think the Pokemon Company would have stepped in.
No.
And I think it's only when they've seen, this has already hit 1 million downloads within, I think it was a couple of weeks, they said in the video. Chances are it's only going to get more and more downloads as time goes on, as more and more people become aware of it. I understand why they shut it down, but I think this is just another case of, like, say the Pokemon Company stepping in and, oh no, like, we don't like what you're doing with Pokemon as a video game.
Yeah, you're treading on our toes a little bit too much here.
Yeah, which again wouldn't have happened if it didn't do as well. This is one that I think out of all of them, this is maybe Pinball DS, maybe, but this is the one that I really do want to just spend a little bit of time playing, which is doable now. It's been released. You can literally play it, which they also say in the video was an absolute nightmare to do because obviously it's an internet-based game and Internet Explorer programs, Google, Firefox, all them will have come along so far in 23 years that I imagine it would have been a palaver to try and get this working. So like, credit for those that have done this, because that's one of the great things about, like, I think one of the things that is right with the internet is the ability to go, this thing that happened 20, 30 years ago, no, you can still do it. It's still there. We've got this collective history now, and it's quite difficult to get rid of that. And I'm glad that this has been restored.
Yeah, I think it's very important. Internet archivists are some of the most valuable people we have available. I think those who are doing it for Pokemon are amazing people. I think Did You Know Gaming have fronted a lot of the cost for digging up the history, translating a lot of these old articles and stuff like that, and I praise them for it. I'm going to have to be that really horrible person who says, I don't think I can do devil's advocate. Let's face facts. Pokemon Gray would have been awful. It's a terrible name. Black and White 2 are too good. Like, I'd have lost this argument. I really don't have an argument for it. You win. I'm just going to give it to you. Okay, my dog is squeaking at me from the door, so I'm going to have to wrap up very quickly, if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine with me. Let's wrap up. I'll save the guessing game for next week then, but let's be honest with you, you would have got 0 out of 3, so it really doesn't matter, of course. So that's the show for this week. If you've gotten this far, you're just top dollar, aren't you? If you've got a comment or question, follow the links down below. Leave us a comment or a question. Leave a review on the podcast platform of your choice, or leave a like on YouTube. Conor, where can we find you?
You can find me on my YouTube channel at Captain Fidget, or on Twitter at CapFidget.
I'm Ben. You can find Professor Owen Gaming on YouTube, Professor Owen on Twitter. I'm speeding through this. We'll be back next Friday for another week of Pokemon podcast content.
See ya. Stop!